I was sitting on our Italian leather sofa, the one we picked out together 3 summers ago when we thought our biggest problem was choosing between eggshell and cream. My arm was draped casually over the backrest, my hand just inches from her shoulder. I could feel the warmth radiating from her skin, a warmth that used to feel like home, but now felt like a fever dream. Next to me, my wife was glowing, not because of the fireplace, but because of the soft blue light of her iPhone. She didn't just look at it. She consumed it. Her thumb swiped with a rhythm that was almost musical, and then it happened. A soft, melodic giggle escaped her lips, the kind of genuine, spontaneous laugh she used to reserve only for our private jokes. She thought I was watching the game. She thought I was lost in the stats and the shouting of the commentators. But I wasn't. I was staring at the reflection in the darkened window across the room. In that hazy glass mirror, I saw her face clearly. She was smiling at a message, her eyes wide with a spark I hadn't seen in years. She wasn't just reading, she was flirting with a ghost, a shadow that sat right there in the room with us, invisible to her eyes, but deafening to my heart. Before I could even shift my weight, the phone flipped. Clack. Face down on the cushion. Silence returned, heavy and suffocating. "What's so funny, babe?" I asked, my voice steady, practiced, a mask of casual curiosity. She didn't flinch. That was the scariest part. She just turned to me, her expression shifting instantly into that rehearsed mask of wifely affection. "Oh, nothing. Just a stupid meme in the girls' group chat. Sarah is being dramatic again." She reached out and patted my knee, a gesture so dismissive it felt like a slap. "You know how she is." I knew exactly how Sarah was. I also knew that Sarah hadn't texted her in 3 days, but I nodded. I played the part of the oblivious, trusting husband because, in that moment, I realized that the woman sitting next to me wasn't the person I married. She was a stranger who had mastered the art of the lie. She kept that phone tucked against her thigh as she stood up to go to the kitchen, never letting it stray more than an inch from her person. It was her lifeline, her secret, her weapon. Have you ever sat inches away from the person you love most and realized they were miles away? Like you're screaming in a soundproof room. If you've ever looked at your partner and seen a stranger, drop a comment below. I need to know I'm not the only one who has lived through this silent war. And if you're new here, hit that subscribe button, because this story isn't just about heartbreak. It's about the moment I stopped being the victim and started being the architect of my own justice. Where are you watching from tonight? Let me know in the comments. I want to see how far this reaches. Our life in this quiet, upscale neighborhood of Austin was supposed to be the prize at the end of a long race. We had the sprawling lawn, the designer kitchen, and the reputation as the perfect couple. I had worked 70-hour weeks at the firm to ensure she never had to worry about a bill, a car payment, or a dream too expensive to catch. I thought I was building a foundation. I didn't realize I was just funding her escape. The signs didn't come in a landslide. They came in whispers. It was the way she started taking her phone into the bathroom to listen to podcasts while she showered. It was the way the screen was always locked with a new, complex passcode she never shared. It was the sudden work dinners that ran until midnight, leaving her smelling of expensive gin and a cologne that definitely wasn't mine. I wanted to believe her. God, I wanted to be the fool. I told myself I was being paranoid, that the stress of the firm was getting to me. but the gut never lies. It's that cold stone in the pit of your stomach that tells you the truth long before your brain is ready to accept it. I remember one night specifically. It was raining. One of those heavy Texas downpours that makes the world feel small. I woke up at 3 a.m. to find her side of the bed cold. I walked down the hallway, my bare feet silent on the hardwood, and saw a sliver of light coming from the laundry room. I peered through the crack. She was leaning against the dryer, her face illuminated by the screen, typing so fast her fingers were a blur. She was biting her lower lip, a look of pure, unadulterated longing on her face. It was the look she used to give me when we were 22 and broke, dreaming of a life like this. I didn't burst in. I didn't scream. I stood there in the dark, shivering in the air-conditioned hallway, and I made a choice. If she wanted to play a game of shadows, I would become the darkness itself. She thought I was the safe choice, the boring husband who would provide the lifestyle while she found her excitement elsewhere. She evaluated me and found me lacking in suspicion. She thought I was too weak to handle the truth, so she didn't even bother to hide it well. She was arrogant. She thought her beauty and my devotion were a shield that made her invincible. I went back to bed and stared at the ceiling until the sun came up. I didn't move when she crept back into the room 20 minutes later, smelling of the cold night air from the back porch. I didn't move when she tucked herself under the covers and let out a satisfied sigh. I just counted my heartbeats, each one a ticking clock, marking the end of our life as we knew it. The next morning, I was at my desk by 7 a.m., but I wasn't looking at spreadsheets. I was searching for someone who could see what I couldn't. I needed a ghost of my own. I needed someone who didn't care about perfect couples or suburban reputations. I found a name that kept coming up in the quiet corners of the internet. A man who specialized in the kind of people who think they're too smart to get caught. I called him from a burner phone I bought at a gas station on my way to work. I didn't use my real name yet. I just told him I needed a shadow. I have a client who thinks his wife is moving pieces on a board he can't see, I said, my voice sounding foreign to my own ears. The man on the other end had a voice like gravel. They always think they're the grandmasters until the clock runs out. Give me a time and a place. I set the meeting for a diner on the outskirts of town, a place where the grease was thick and the questions were thin. As I sat in that booth, clutching a mug of lukewarm coffee, I watched the door. Every time the bell chimed, my heart lurched. I felt like a criminal, even though I was the one who had been robbed. I was about to peel back the skin of my life and look at the rot underneath. When he finally walked in, he didn't look like a movie detective. He looked like a guy who fixed air conditioners. Unremarkable, blending into the beige walls of the world. He slid into the booth opposite me without a word and set a small, battered notebook on the table. "I'm Harlan," I said, finally putting a name to the pain. "I know who you are, Harlan," he replied, his eyes scanning the room without moving his head. "I've been watching you since you pulled into the lot. You're nervous. That's good. It means you still have something to lose. My name is Dax. Now tell me about the phone." I told him everything. The giggles, the upside-down screen, the laundry room at 3 a.m., the way she held that device like it was the Holy Grail. Dax listened, his face an unreadable mask of professional indifference. He didn't offer sympathy. He didn't tell me it would be okay. He just waited for the facts. "She thinks I'm a joke," I whispered, the words burning my throat. "She thinks I'm sitting right there next to her, too stupid to see what's happening right under my nose. Dax leaned forward, the light catching the gray in his stubble. They all do, Harlan. Arrogance is the greatest gift a cheater can give you. It makes them sloppy. They start believing their own lies because they think you're too invested in the fairy tale to look for the exit. He tapped the notebook. I can get you the photos, I can get you the logs, but you need to decide right now. Do you want the truth, or do you want your life back? Because usually, you can't have both. I want her to feel exactly what I'm feeling, I said, the coldness finally settling into my bones. I want her to realize that while she was playing me, I was the one holding the remote. Dax nodded slowly. Then we don't just watch her. We follow the money. Infidelity is rarely just about the bedroom, Harlan. It's about the exit strategy. If she's as bold as you say, she's not just looking for a new bed, she's looking for a new bank account. He handed me a small, encrypted thumb drive. Install this on the home router. It'll mirror every packet of data that moves through that house. Every text, every disappearing photo, every bank login. If it's in the air, it's mine. I took the drive. It felt heavy, like a piece of lead. As I walked out of that diner and back to my car, the Texas sun felt blindingly bright, casting long, jagged shadows across the asphalt. I drove home, my hands gripping the steering wheel so hard my knuckles turned white. When I pulled into our driveway, I saw her through the front window. She was standing in the kitchen, a glass of wine in one hand, her phone in the other, her head tilted back in a silent laugh. I walked through the front door, the chime of the security system announcing my arrival. She didn't even look up. "Hey, honey," she called out, her voice airy and light. "You're home early. I was just thinking about ordering Thai for dinner. What do you think?" I looked at her, really looked at her. I saw the expensive silk blouse I bought her for her birthday. I saw the diamond earrings that matched the ones she wore in the wedding photos on the mantel. She looked beautiful. She looked perfect. She looked like a lie. "Thai sounds great," I said, forced a smile that didn't reach my eyes, and walked straight toward the hallway where the router sat hidden in a decorative wicker basket. My heart was hammering against my ribs, a frantic bird trapped in a cage of bone. I reached into my pocket, my fingers brushing against the cold metal of the thumb drive, my eyes fixed on the small, blinking green lights of the device that would either save me or destroy the last remnants of the man I used to be. The plastic casing of the router felt slick against my sweaty palm as I fumbled in the shadows of the hallway. Every blink of those tiny green LEDs felt like a heartbeat, a rhythmic reminder that I was crossing a line from which there was no return. I slid the drive into the port, a soft click echoing in the narrow space, and suddenly the air in the house felt different. It was no longer just a home, it was a net. I pulled my hand back, wiped the moisture onto my slacks, and took a deep breath of the filtered, expensive air that Veda loved so much. I could hear the clinking of silverware in the kitchen, the mundane sounds of a woman preparing a meal for a husband she was systematically betraying. It was a symphony of domesticity played by a conductor with a hidden agenda. When I stepped back into the kitchen, the light seemed harsher, exposing every artificial line of our curated life. Veda was tossing a salad, her movements fluid and practiced. She didn't look like a conspirator. She looked like an illustration from a high-end lifestyle magazine. But as she reached for the olive oil, her phone, perched precariously on the edge of the granite island, lit up with a notification. She didn't grab it. Not yet. She waited until my back was turned toward the refrigerator. I caught the movement in the stainless steel reflection. A quick, claw-like snatch, a frantic tap, and then that small, satisfied exhale that twisted the knife in my gut. The Thai food arrived an hour later, smelling of lemongrass and deception. We sat across from each other at the mahogany table, the silence between us filled by the aggressive scraping of forks against ceramic. I watched her. I watched the way she avoided my eyes, focusing instead on her pad thai as if it contained the secrets of the universe. Every few minutes, her hand would stray toward her lap, her thumb twitching with the muscle memory of 1,000 secret messages. She was a ghost hunter, and I was the haunt she had grown too bored to notice. "You're very quiet tonight, Harlan," she said, finally looking up. Her eyes were bright, almost feverish. "Is the firm putting that much pressure on you? You know, you should really take a week off. Maybe we could go down to Cabo, just the two of us." The audacity of it nearly made me laugh. Cabo, the place we went for our honeymoon. She wanted to take the man she was robbing to the place where we promised forever, likely using the very funds she was siphoning away to pay for the tickets. I looked at her, searching for a flicker of guilt, a tremor in her voice, anything that signaled a lingering soul. There was nothing. Just the smooth, polished surface of a woman who had already checked out of the building. "Work is work," I replied, my voice sounding like it was coming from a great distance. "But Cabo sounds expensive. Maybe we should check the savings first." A shadow flitted across her face, gone in a heartbeat, but I saw it. It was a flicker of panic, a momentary glitch in her programming. She laughed it off, a brittle, metallic sound. "Oh, don't be such a bean counter. We've earned it." She went back to her food, but the tension in her shoulders had shifted. She was calculating. I realized then that Dax was right. It wasn't just about the thrill of a new bed. It was a strategic extraction. She wasn't just leaving, she was harvesting. That night, I didn't sleep. I sat in the darkness of my home office, the blue light of my laptop reflecting in my glasses. I had accessed the portal Dax set up. The data was beginning to pour in, a digital hemorrhage of her private life. I saw the encrypted folders, the hidden apps disguised as calculators, and then the messages. They weren't just spicy, they were tactical. "He's suspicious about the Cabo talk. We need to move faster with the transfer. If he checks the joint equity account before Friday, we're done," she had messaged Rocco at 11:42 p.m. while I was supposedly snoring beside her. Rocco's reply made my blood turn to ice. "Relax, babe. He's a suit. He sees what he wants to see. Just keep playing the tired wife bit. Once the signatures are mirrored, the house is ours to flip. He won't even have enough for a deposit on a studio apartment when I'm through with him." I leaned back, the leather of my office chair creaking in the silence. They weren't just having an affair. They were engineering my professional and personal ruin. The signatures being mirrored, that meant they were forging my digital identity to secure loans against our property, draining the equity I had spent 15 years building. They were planning to turn me into a ghost in my own life, a man with a name but no means. The betrayal of the body I could have eventually forgiven, perhaps, but the cold-blooded assassination of my future, that required a different kind of response. I felt a strange, chilling clarity wash over me. The pain was still there, a raw, jagged edge, but it was being overlaid by something much more durable, a predatory instinct. They thought I was a suit, a boring analyst who moved numbers on a screen. They forgot that analysts know how to find the errors in the code. The next morning, I met Dax in a park. He was sitting on a bench, throwing breadcrumbs to pigeons that looked as ragged as he did. I sat down next to him, the weight of the night's discoveries making my limbs feel like lead. "You look like hell, Harlan," he said, not looking at me. "They're taking the house, Dax. They're forging my signatures. They want me on the street." Dax stopped throwing bread. He turned his head slowly, his eyes sharp behind a pair of cheap sunglasses. "I saw the logs this morning. Your wife isn't just a cheater. She's a predator." "And Rocco?" "He's got 3 different aliases and a trail of broken hearts from San Diego to Nashville that all ended with empty bank accounts. She thinks she's the one in control, but she's just the bait he's using to get to your bigger assets." "What do we do?" I asked, my voice trembling. "We don't stop them," Dax whispered. "If we stop them now, she walks away with half of what's left and a slap on the wrist for marital indiscretion. No, we let them think they're winning. We feed them what they want to see." He handed me a folder. Inside were the details of a commercial property in the warehouse district, a derelict building I had supposedly been scouting for a secret investment. "She's been keylogging your computer," Dax explained. "She knows you're looking at this property. We're going to make it look like you've moved all your liquid cash into this sure thing. We're going to give her a target so big she won't be able to resist trying to snatch it. While she's reaching for the bait, we're going to move the floor out from under her." I went back to the office and did exactly what Dax told me. I opened the files. I looked at the contracts. I made sure the private tabs were visible to the keylogger she had installed. I acted like a man desperate to make a comeback, a man putting all his eggs in one basket. At home, I played the part. I was more affectionate, more clueless. I even bought her flowers, lilies, her favorite. I watched her take them, her smile reaching her eyes for the first time in weeks, not because she loved me, but because she saw me as a lamb walking toward the slaughter. It was a sickening dance. I would kiss her cheek, feeling the pulse in her neck, knowing that in her mind she was already picking out the furniture for the new life she'd buy with my ruins. I spent my evenings sitting on that same sofa, watching her phone flip back and forth. Clack, clack, the sound of the guillotine. But now, I was the one holding the blade. Every time she laughed at a message, I smiled back, imagining the look on her face when the liquid cash she thought she was stealing turned out to be a mountain of debt I had carefully tied to her name through the very fraudulent accounts she was opening. The tension was becoming a physical weight. I began to lose weight. My skin went pale. Veda noticed, of course. "Harlan, you look terrible," she said one evening, stroking my hair with a tenderness that made me want to scream. "You're working too hard on this new project. Why don't you let me help? I could look over the paperwork for you. You always say I have a good eye for detail." There it was, the move. She wanted to help with the paperwork so she could finalize the forgery. "Maybe you're right," I said, leaning my head into her hand, playing the broken man to perfection. "I'm just so tired, Veda. I feel like I'm drowning. If this deal doesn't go through, I don't know what we'll do." "It'll go through, honey," she whispered, her fingers tracing the line of my jaw. "I'll make sure of it." She stayed up late that night, working in the living room. I stayed in the bedroom, staring at the feed on my phone. I watched in real time as she accessed the dummy files Dax and I had created. I watched her eyes widen as she saw the balance of the investment account, 7 figures of phantom money. I watched her call Rocco, her voice a frantic, hushed vibration through the baby monitor I had hidden in the lamp. "It's more than we thought," she hissed into the phone. "He's got it all in one place. If we trigger the transfer on Friday during the closing, he won't be able to stop it. He'll be tied up in the legalities of the building while the money hits the Cayman account." I closed my eyes. The trap was set. The woman I had shared a bed with for over a decade was currently orchestrating my total annihilation with the glee of a child on Christmas morning. Friday was the day of the closing. I spent the morning at the bank, making sure every document was exactly where it needed to be. I met with Maren, the lawyer Dax had recommended. She was a woman who looked like she chewed glass for breakfast and liked the taste. She reviewed the trail of breadcrumbs Veda had left, the forged signatures, the IP addresses tied to our home router, the communications with Rocco. "She's been very thorough," Maren said, tapping a pen against her teeth. "She's effectively committed 3 counts of wire fraud and aggravated identity theft. Usually, in a divorce, the wife gets the benefit of the doubt. But when she's caught on camera and digital logs trying to bankrupt her husband for a career criminal, the judge isn't going to be kind." "I don't want kindness," I said. "I want her to have nothing. Not even the clothes she's wearing. In this state, with this evidence, consider it done. But Harlan, you have to stay calm. If you blow your cover before the transfer is initiated, she can claim it was all a misunderstanding. We need her to actually hit send. We need the crime to be complete." I drove home, my heart a dull thud in my chest. The neighborhood was quiet, the trees swaying in a gentle breeze that mocked the storm inside me. I walked into the house and found Veda in the dining room, surrounded by suitcases. "Veda, what's going on?" I asked, my voice cracking, half acting, half genuine shock at the speed of her move. She didn't even look up this time. She was dressed in a sleek black travel suit. Her phone was in her hand, the screen glowing. She looked up at me, and for the first time, the mask was gone. There was no sweet wife, no girls' group chat smile. There was only a cold, sharp triumph. "I'm going away for a few days, Harlan. I told you I need a break. My flight is in 2 hours. But the closing, the investment, you said you'd help me today." She let out a short, mocking laugh. "Oh, Harlan, you really are a pathetic man. Do you honestly think I was going to spend the rest of my life watching you grow old and gray in this boring house?" She tapped her phone screen one last time with a flourish. "The help I gave you was the only help you'll ever need. You should check your accounts. I think you'll find everything is exactly where it belongs." She grabbed her luggage and walked toward the door, her heels clicking a sharp, final rhythm on the floorboards. She didn't look back. She didn't offer a goodbye. She just walked out into the afternoon sun, leaving the front door wide open. I stood in the center of the foyer, the silence of the house rushing in to fill the space she had left. I reached into my pocket and pulled out my own phone. My thumb hovered over the screen, waiting for the notification from Dax. My breath hitched as the screen flickered to life. A single message appearing from the man in the shadows, confirming that the digital bridge had been crossed and the first domino had finally, irrevocably fallen. The light from my smartphone screen bled into the dim foyer, a cold, clinical white that made the dust motes dancing in the open doorway look like falling ash. The notification from Dax wasn't just a text, it was a digital death warrant. It read, "Target has initiated the grand theft. Signal intercepted." The phantom funds are moving, and she's left a trail of breadcrumbs wide enough for a blind man to follow. Welcome to the endgame, Harlan. I leaned my head back against the cold wallpaper, listening to the distant roar of Veda's SUV as she sped toward what she thought was a life of luxury. She hadn't just stolen from me, she had tried to erase me. But standing there in the hollow shell of our perfect home, I didn't feel erased. I felt sharpened. I walked through the house, my footsteps echoing on the floor she had insisted on polishing every single week. I went into the bedroom and saw the empty drawers, the discarded hangers, the faint scent of her perfume still clinging to the curtains like a lingering lie. She had been so sure of herself. That was the beauty of it. Her arrogance was the oxygen that fed the fire I had set. I sat on the edge of the bed, our bed, and pulled out a second phone, the one connected directly to Marin's office. "She's in transit," I said, my voice sounding like gravel grinding together. "She thinks the money is hitting the Cayman account as we speak." "Good." Marin's voice was sharp, professional, and entirely devoid of pity. "Dax has already rerouted the confirmation pings. She'll see a successful transfer screen on her phone, but the money isn't in the Caymans, Harlan. It's sitting in a court-supervised escrow account tied to the fraud investigation. By the time she reaches the airport, she'll be checking a balance that exists only in a digital hallucination. Are you ready for the next phase? You have to be seen, Harlan. You have to play the victim one last time." I didn't reply. I didn't need to. I stood up and walked to the mirror. I looked at the man staring back, haggard, tired, the suit she despised. I grabbed a glass from the nightstand and threw it against the wall. It shattered into 1,000 jagged diamonds. I needed the house to look like a man had lost his mind. I needed the neighbors, the security cameras, and the eventual police report to show a husband in the throes of a breakdown. I overturned a chair. I swept the wedding photos off the mantel. I made a mess of the life we had spent a decade faking. Then I took a deep breath, straightened my shirt, and walked out to my car. I had a dinner to attend, a dinner Veda thought I was too broken to go to. The restaurant was one of those see-and-be-seen places in downtown Austin, all floor-to-ceiling glass and mid-century modern furniture. I walked in, looking exactly like the man I was supposed to be, a man whose world was crumbling. I spotted our friends, the couples we had played tennis with, the people who would gossip about this for years. I sat down, ordered a double scotch, and waited for the phone calls to start. I watched the clock. In her mind, she was at the gate now. She was probably sitting next to Rocco, holding his hand, whispering about the yachts they'd buy and the champagne they'd drink. She was likely checking her banking app every 30 seconds, watching those imaginary numbers glow. I could almost see her face, that smug, beautiful mask of hers, finally feeling like she had won against the boring analyst she had outsmarted. Have you ever watched someone walk into a trap they built for you? It's a strange feeling. It's not joy. It's not even relief. It's just a cold, hard sense of balance. If you've ever had to play the fool to catch a snake, leave a comment. Tell me how you kept your face still while your heart was screaming. And if you're still with me, make sure you've hit that notification bell. This is where the story stops being a tragedy and starts being a masterclass in consequences. Halfway through the main course, my phone vibrated on the table. It wasn't Dax, it wasn't Maren, it was Veda. I didn't answer. I let it go to voicemail, then she called again, and again. The friends at the table started looking at me with pitying eyes. "Everything okay, Harlan?" one of them asked, reaching out to touch my arm. "You look frazzled." "Veda's on a trip," I said, my voice trembling perfectly. She didn't say where. I think something's wrong." I stepped away from the table, pretending to be overwhelmed, and retreated to the hallway near the restrooms. I picked up the fourth call. "Harlan, you bastard, what did you do?" Her voice was a shriek, stripped of all its silk and polish. The background noise was the frantic hum of an airport terminal. "The account is locked. I'm at the gate and the card was declined. Why is the account locked?" "Veda, is that you? I thought you were in the air," I said, pitching my voice into a state of confused panic. "The bank called me, honey. They said there was a massive fraud alert. Someone tried to wire everything, all our savings, the equity, everything, to some offshore account in the Caribbean. They froze it all for an investigation. I've been trying to call you." There was a long silence on the other end, filled only by the sound of her heavy, ragged breathing. I could hear Rocco's voice in the background, muffled and angry, asking her what was taking so long. "A fraud alert?" she whispered, the panic finally setting in. But it said successful. "The bank said it was a sophisticated hack," I continued, leaning into the lie. "They think someone keylogged my computer. Veda, we have nothing. They said until the investigation is over, we can't touch a dime. I don't even know how I'm going to pay for dinner. Where are you? I'll come get you." "No, stay away from me," she screamed, and the line went dead. I stood in that hallway, the smell of expensive soap and roasted garlic in the air, and I smiled. It was the first real smile I'd had in months. She was at the airport, likely with bags full of clothes she couldn't afford, sitting next to a man who only loved her for the money she no longer had. I texted Dax. "Phase 2 complete. She's panicked. Rocco is going to realize the well is dry in T-minus 10 minutes. Dax replied instantly, "Rocco's already looking at the exits. I've got a tail on him." As soon as he realizes that Cayman account is a ghost, he's going to dump her at the terminal like a piece of unwanted luggage. Get to the secondary location. The hidden cameras are live. The secondary location was a small, dingy motel near the airport, the kind of place where you pay by the hour and don't ask about the stains on the carpet. Dax had set up a safe house for Veda and Rocco, a place she thought they would hide out until the money cleared. I had accidentally left the address in an open email on my laptop. I drove there in a different car, a rental that wouldn't be recognized. I parked across the street, hidden behind a dumpster, and opened my laptop. The feed from the motel room was crystal clear. They arrived 20 minutes later. The door slammed open and Veda stormed in, her sleek black suit now wrinkled, her hair starting to fray. Rocco followed her, but he wasn't the bad boy charmer anymore. He looked like a cornered rat. "You told me it was a sure thing," Rocco yelled, throwing his leather bag onto the bed. "You told me the suit was a moron. 7 figures, Veda. You said 7 figures." "He is a moron. It's the bank, Rocco. They flagged it." Veda was pacing the tiny room, her hands shaking so hard she dropped her phone. "We just need to wait. Harlan is a wreck. He'll fix it. He always fixes it. He'll call the bank, he'll clear the fraud alert, and then we'll move it again. We don't have time to wait. Rocco stepped into her space, his face inches from hers. I've got people looking for me, Veda. I didn't sign up for a waiting game. I signed up for a payday. If that money isn't there, I'm gone. You can't leave me, Veda's voice broke. It was the sound of a woman realizing she had bet everything on a losing hand. I gave you everything. I forged those papers. I risked prison for you. You risked it for yourself, Rocco sneered, reaching into his pocket and pulling out a cigarette. Don't act like you did me a favor. You wanted the life. Well, look at you now. You're in a $30 motel with a frozen bank account and a husband who's probably calling the police right now. I watched them through the screen, my heart beating in a slow, steady rhythm. This was the woman who laughed while I sat next to her. This was the woman who thought I was a suit to be harvested. Watching her crumble wasn't about revenge. It was about the truth. The truth that her beauty was a hollow shell and her intelligence was nothing more than a collection of cheap tricks. Then, the final blow of the night arrived. Veda's phone buzzed on the floor. She scrambled for it, her eyes wide with hope. Maybe it was the bank. Maybe it was a miracle. It was an email from Maren's law firm. I watched her face go from pale to translucent as she read the subject line: formal notice of eviction and preliminary injunction. Because I had moved all our assets into the warehouse investment, the one that was actually a shell company owned by my family's trust, and because she had signed documents admitting she had no claim to those specific funds as part of her investment strategy, she had effectively signed away her right to the house and any temporary support. Maren had moved with the speed of a strike team. While Veda was at the airport, a locksmith had already changed the codes on our Austin home. Her belongings, the ones she hadn't packed, were currently being moved into a storage unit in a bad part of town. The house, Veda whispered, her voice barely audible through the microphone Dax had hidden. He locked me out. He locked me out of the house. Rocco didn't even look at her. He was already zip-lining his bag shut. Tough luck, babe. Sounds like the suit has a spine after all. Rocco, wait, where are you going? I'm going where the money is, Veda, and it clearly isn't here. He walked out, the door swinging shut with a pathetic, hollow thud. Veda stood in the center of that miserable room, surrounded by the smell of cheap tobacco and the flickering light of a neon sign outside the window. She looked at her phone, the device that had been her weapon, her confidant, her secret world. It was silent now. No more giggles, no more spicy photos. Just a black screen reflecting her own desperate face. She sat down on the edge of the stained mattress and began to cry. Not the delicate, pretty cry she used to do to get her way, but a raw, ugly sob that shook her entire body. I watched her for a long time. I watched her realize that the man she thought was invisible had been the only thing holding her world together. I closed the laptop and sat in the dark of the rental car. The Texas night was hot and thick, but I felt a strange, internal chill. The war wasn't over, but the first major battle was won. She was alone, she was broke, and she was beginning to understand that I wasn't just a husband she could discard. I put the car in gear and drove away from the motel, leaving her to the silence she had earned. I drove toward Maren's office, my mind already moving to the final stage. We had the fraud. We had the intent. Now we needed to make it permanent. As I pulled onto the highway, the city lights blurred into long streaks of gold and red, a neon roadmap to a future where I didn't have to look over my shoulder. I reached over to the passenger seat and picked up the original phone, the one she thought I never looked at, and I felt the weight of it in my hand. A small glass and metal tomb for a marriage that had died long before the first message was ever sent. The highway stretched out before me, a vein of asphalt bleeding into the horizon. I rolled down the windows, letting the humid Texas night air rush in, whipping through the cabin and carrying away the suffocating scent of lilies and expensive gin that had defined my life for too long. Behind me, in the rearview mirror, the neon sign of that cheap motel flickered and died. A fitting metaphor for Veda's new reality. She was back there, sitting on a polyester bedspread, finally understanding the weight of the silence she had created. I wasn't the victim anymore. I wasn't even just a husband. I was the architect of a brand new world, and the old one was currently being hauled away in a dumpster. I pulled up to the curb of a nondescript office building where the lights on the top floor were still burning. Maren was waiting. She didn't look like a woman who had been working for 18 hours straight. She looked like a general surveying a conquered territory. Spread out across her desk were the final documents, the culmination of the digital ghost hunt Dax had spearheaded. "You did it, Harlan," she said, sliding a pen toward me. "By initiating that transfer from your home IP address while using the forged digital certificates she created, she didn't just try to steal your money. She effectively admitted to every count of identity theft and financial fraud we've been tracking. She didn't just walk into the trap, she locked the door behind her." I signed the final papers with a steady hand. My signature didn't shake. The suit was officially closing the book. Because the warehouse investment was structured as a pre-existing family trust asset that Veda had voluntarily attempted to liquidate through fraudulent means, she had triggered a specific clause in our prenuptial agreement that we had added years ago, a clause about moral turpitude and willful financial endangerment. "She walked out of the house with 2 suitcases and a phone that doesn't work," Maren noted, her voice devoid of any warmth. "Legally, she has no right to return to the property. She has no access to the joint accounts, which are now under a permanent freeze pending the criminal investigation." "And Rocco?" Dax just confirmed he cleared out his storage unit and headed for the border. He left her with nothing but a $30 motel bill she can't even pay. I leaned back, a strange sense of peace settling over me. It wasn't the fiery, explosive vengeance you see in movies. It was something much colder. It was justice served at room temperature. But I had one more stop to make. I drove back to my neighborhood. The streets were quiet, the manicured lawns glowing under the silver moonlight. I pulled into the driveway and sat there for a moment, looking at the house. It was a beautiful structure, but it was just brick and mortar. The memories that lived there had been poisoned, and I knew I couldn't stay. I walked to the front door, entered the new security code, and stepped inside. The house was cold. The movers had done their work. All of Veda's vanity, her designer shoes, her vanity mirrors, the expensive art she bought to impress people she didn't even like, it was all gone. All that remained was the furniture I had paid for and the empty spaces where her lies used to live. I walked into the kitchen and saw her phone lying on the island. She had left it behind in her panic, or perhaps Rocco had snatched it and then discarded it when he realized it was being tracked. I picked it up. The screen was cracked, a jagged spiderweb across the glass. I didn't try to unlock it. I didn't need to see the messages anymore. I knew the story by heart. I walked out to the back porch and sat in the chair where I had spent so many nights wondering what I had done wrong. I looked out at the dark trees and thought about the journey. from the first giggle on the sofa to the ugly sobs in a motel room. So I have to ask you, did I go too far? Some people say that no matter what someone does to you, you should walk away with your head high and leave them their dignity. Others say that when someone tries to destroy your life, your only responsibility is to make sure they don't have the tools to do it to anyone else. Veda wanted to leave me homeless and broken. Instead, she's the one looking for a place to sleep tonight. Was the punishment fair, or was I just as cold as she was? I want to hear your thoughts in the comments. This community has been my rock through this, and I want to know where you draw the line between justice and revenge. If you haven't yet, please subscribe. My life is changing now. The suit is moving on to a smaller house, a quieter life, and a future where honesty isn't a luxury. I'll be sharing the next chapter of this rebuilding process soon, and I'd love to have you there. The next morning, I was woken up by a frantic knocking at the door. I didn't even have to look at the security camera to know who it was. I made a cup of coffee, took a slow sip, and finally opened the door. Veda stood there. She looked like a ghost. Her black suit was stained, her eyes were bloodshot and swollen, and she was trembling in the cool morning air. She didn't have her luggage. She didn't have her confidence. She just had a desperate, wild look in her eyes. "Harlan, please," she rasped, her voice breaking. Rocco took everything. He took my jewelry, the little cash I had. He just left me there. I have nowhere to go. Please, just let me in for a minute. Let me explain. I stood in the doorway, the warm mug of coffee in my hand, looking at the woman I had once promised to protect. I didn't feel anger. I didn't feel pity. I felt the same way an observer feels looking at a car wreck on the side of the road, glad it wasn't me, but fully aware of the tragedy. "There's nothing to explain, Veda," I said, my voice calm and quiet. "The police have the logs. Maren has the signatures and the house. It's already on the market. I'm leaving and you were never really here." "You can't do this. I'm your wife," she screamed, her old fire flaring up for a brief, pathetic second. "No," I replied, taking another sip of coffee. "You were the woman who smiled while she texted another man right next to me. That woman is gone. And the man you thought was too stupid to see you, he's gone too." I reached out and handed her a small envelope. Inside was a $20 bill and the address of a local women's shelter. It was more than she had planned to leave me. "Goodbye, Veda." I closed the door. I didn't wait to hear her scream or beat her fists against the wood. I walked back into the kitchen, picked up my bag, and headed for the garage. As I drove down the driveway for the very last time, I didn't look at the rearview mirror. I looked straight ahead, through the windshield, at the empty road that was finally, beautifully, all mine. I turned on the radio, found a station playing something upbeat and new, and drove toward the sunrise, leaving the shadows of the perfect couple exactly where they belonged, in the past.